A slide in Slidify is demarked by the three dashes at the in between. They need to be in a line all by themselves. I find in Slidify, often the biggest way I'm messing things up is I have text that's sort of touching when it needs a new line in between it. So, always check that. The two pound signs have there's I think it's 2 pound signs, I believe, is H1, the HTML equivalent of H1 when the markdown gets rendered. Let's see, these like dot class pound ID, this is how you can add slide specific options to that slide in Slidify. It looks like this kind of format here, but before you do that, I would get used to just using ordinary Slidify before you started messing around with the slide specific changes. Okay, then when you're done, you compile your R Markdown file with Slidify. We've seen how to do that. And then if you have Knitter installed, you can do browse URL. If not, you can just open up Explorer or whatever it's called in whatever operating system you're using, and double click on the HTML file. It'll bring it up for you. And by the way, after you've re-slidified it, you can just switch over to your browser and type Control-R or Apple-R or whatever, refreshes the page. You don't have to actually reload the slide every time. Okay, so how do you publish things? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do it. So you have, if you do it as standalone, for example, you just have standalone HTML with all the libraries in a file there. You can put it on wherever if you have some space to host it on the web. If you want to publish it to GitHub, you can create a new empty repository, and then Slidify has a command that's just publish GitHub user, then the repo that you want it in. And if you're one of the people like us that actually often host websites off of GitHub using GitHub Pages, then this is particularly nice because not only can you put the Slidify code in the HTML on GitHub, but you can actually web host it off of GitHub as well. That's the easy way. Slidify has some other ways of publishing. If you have a public Dropbox folder, it will copy it to Dropbox, and then just like you can host an HTML file off of Dropbox, it can do it that way. You can put the HTML file wherever you'd like. I tend to use GitHub, but there's other options as well. If you can actually just send the HTML file, a zipped up directory to someone if you want to never have it be hosted on the internet. So there's different frameworks. Here's some of the different frameworks. I tend to use IO, so that one's first. But some of these HTML effects are actually pretty fancy, so you should check them out. A lot of them are really neat. LaTeX is pretty easy if you have reason to include math. So if you do x squared in single dollar signs, you get x raised to the power 2, like that. Or x caret 2 gives x raised to the power 2. Your YAML has to have MathJax loaded in the widgets. MathJax is a mathematics rendering JavaScript library. So here's an example right here of putting the quadratic formula. There we go. Let's see. If you actually want to do some more advanced HTML than what Markdown lets you do, just try putting the HTML in the Markdown file. 99% of the time that just works. So that's like images or tables, where if you want more control than Markdown actually gives you, then you might just include the raw HTML. Also, you can always edit the final HTML slide deck that you get out of Slidify. But again, I wouldn't say this is the best solution. Like, if you're gonna do that, why not have just coded in HTML to begin with? The whole point of doing Slidify is that you can embed your R code. But anyway, it's sometimes useful in a pinch if you're frantically preparing course slides at the last minute like me, and you just have something that you can't change and you can't figure out how to do in Slidify, but you know how to use the HTML. And then you can do whatever else you normally do in a web page after you're done. But again, to me it ruins a lot of the utility of slidify if you don't do it with do basically everything with the slidify command. There's a lot better web development solutions if you're removing the condition that you want to compile the R code along with the presentation. If you remove that requirement, then there's so many web authoring tools that I don't think at that point slidify wouldn't be competitive anymore. The only reason is to use it for this specific purpose where you're using R. Or maybe if you happen to be familiar with R and not too familiar with other web technologies. So it's actually kind of interesting. You can add interactive elements to slidify. You can add things like quiz questions. You can have it where the web page can accept quiz questions and give hints, and it has a very nice format. You can add interactive R chart plots. You can add shiny apps. Of course, all these things are standard HTML things. So you could do it directly with the HTML / JavaScript. But Ramneth has coded this directly into slidify, and I give the link here where you can see some of these examples. So we'll do one. So here's the R Markdown syntax. Right, so here's the R Markdown syntax. Yeah, I would just write question 1, what's 1 + 1? I would say, here's my set of answers, and I put the underscores around 2 here because that's the correct answer. I put a hint of this form, and I put an explanation of this form, and that's the slide syntax, okay, that I would use. And then it looks like this when it comes up. So if I do 1 and I try submit answer, it says, no, you're wrong. If I try 3, submit answer, I say, no, you're wrong. If I try 4, submit it, no, you're wrong. Darn it, this is a hard question. Maybe I could ask for a hint. It says this is a hint. Well, that's a pretty useful hint. Now I know the answer, it's 2. And then now I can submit and show the answer, which might drop down an explanation, except it's getting chopped off because of how I'm recording the screen, but it just says this is an explanation. It's got a little okay. The style here is the Twitter Bootstrap style. You can clear it and try it again. This time I'm confident I can get the right answer.